Hi guys, in the quiet hours before full sunrise, when the sky above the Nile is still soft and pale, the temples of ancient Egypt rest in a silence that feels almost complete. The stone walls hold the coolness of the night, and the air inside the courtyards is still, carrying only the faintest trace of incense from the day before. Far beyond the temple gates, the river moves slowly, as it always does, reflecting the first hint of light in a long, gentle shimmer. Everything feels calm, as if the land itself is breathing slowly, not yet ready to wake. In this quiet beginning, the Egyptian priests are already stirring. They do not rise with noise or urgency. Their waking is slow, shaped by habit and long discipline. In small sleeping rooms made of stone and mud brick, they open their eyes to the dimness of early morning. Some lie still for a moment longer, listening to the faint sounds of the temple around them. A distant bird calls. A soft wind passes through narrow corridors. Somewhere, water is being drawn from a basin. Life begins again, but softly, almost carefully, as if not to disturb the sacred stillness of the place. The priests rise from their simple bedding. There is no comfort of soft pillows or thick blankets. Their sleep is light and practical, meant only to restore the body for another day of service. They sit for a moment on woven mats, letting their thoughts settle. Outside, the sky slowly brightens, and the long shadows of temple columns stretch across stone floors like quiet lines drawn by time itself. Before anything else, they wash. Water is drawn from cool storage jars or nearby basins fed by the Nile. The act is slow and deliberate. Hands, face, and feet are cleansed carefully, as if each movement carries meaning beyond cleanliness alone. The water feels fresh against the skin, carrying the memory of the river, the same river that gives life to fields, villages, and cities far beyond the temple walls. In this moment, even the simple act of washing becomes part of a larger rhythm, one that connects the priests to everything around them. After washing, they dress in plain linen garments. The cloth is light, almost weightless against the body, woven carefully by skilled hands. It is not meant for decoration or comfort alone, but for purity. As the fabric settles against their skin, it moves gently with each breath. Sandals are fastened quietly, the sound of leather against stone barely noticeable in the stillness of the early morning. The temple is now slowly waking with them. Other priests pass through narrow corridors, their footsteps soft on the stone. There is no loud greeting, no unnecessary speech. Only small nods, brief moments of recognition, and the shared understanding of routine. Each man has his place in the rhythm of the temple, and each morning begins in much the same way, as it has for many years. Outside in the open courtyards, the air is cooler than it will be later in the day. The sun has not yet risen fully above the horizon, and shadows still linger in the corners of columns and statues. The temple itself feels like a world apart, separated from the growing noise of nearby towns and farms. Here, everything moves with purpose but without haste. The priests begin their first duties with silence. Some move toward storage rooms where offerings are prepared. Others walk toward inner chambers where sacred objects are kept. A few remain near the entrances, observing the slow arrival of light across the stone ground. Their work is not rushed. Each action is performed with steady hands and focused attention, as though even the smallest movement is part of something far greater. In the kitchens of the temple complex, early preparations begin. Bread is baked in simple ovens fueled by wood and heat that has been carefully controlled. The smell of grain and warm dough drifts softly through the air. Water is poured into clay vessels. Dates and figs are arranged in small portions for offerings and daily meals. The sounds here are quiet but constant, the gentle tapping of tools, the soft movement of baskets, the low murmur of workers communicating without unnecessary words. Outside the temple walls, the world of ordinary life is also waking. Farmers move slowly toward their fields along dusty paths. Fishermen prepare their nets by the riverbank, standing in the cool air before the heat of the day arrives. Workers begin to gather at construction sites where stone and mud brick structures rise gradually under careful hands. The priests, though separate in their sacred duties, are still connected to this wider world. The grain they receive, the linen they wear, the offerings placed before the gods, all of it comes from the labor of those who begin their day in the same soft light. Inside the temple, the first formal rituals of the morning begin. The priests gather in quiet spaces where the air is slightly cooler and still carries traces of incense from the night before. Lamps are lit with steady flames, their light small but steady against the growing brightness outside. The flicker of fire against stone creates a soft glow that moves across carved walls and ancient symbols. The statues of the gods stand in these chambers, unmoving and silent. They are carefully tended, washed, and dressed according to ritual tradition. Every movement around them is slow and deliberate. Water is poured gently. Cloth is adjusted with care. Offerings are placed in precise order. The priests do not rush. There is a calm seriousness in everything they do, as if time itself pauses within these rooms. Outside these sacred chambers, the temple continues its quiet rhythm. Scribes sit at low desks, carefully marking symbols onto papyrus sheets. Their hands move with practiced ease, recording offerings, tracking supplies, and maintaining the records that keep temple life in order. The scratching of reed pens against paper is one of the few sounds that breaks the deeper silence of the morning. In another part of the complex, servants carry water, food, and ritual items between rooms. Their steps are steady, their movements familiar. They know each corridor, each turning path, each small detail of the space they work within. Though their labor is constant, it is carried out with a sense of calm acceptance, as if it belongs naturally to the rhythm of the temple. As the sun rises further, light begins to fill the open courtyards. Stone warms slowly under the growing heat. Shadows shorten. The air becomes brighter, clearer, and slightly heavier. The priests continue their duties without change in pace. There is no need to hurry. The structure of their day is already known, shaped by tradition and repetition. Some move outward toward the edges of the temple to observe the land beyond. From here, they can see the river glimmering in the distance. They can see fields stretching wide and green in places where irrigation has reached. They can see small movements of daily life unfolding far beyond the temple walls. Yet they remain rooted in their space, observing rather than joining, maintaining the quiet boundary between sacred duty and ordinary labor. As morning settles more fully into the land, the temple becomes gently more active, though never chaotic. More priests arrive from nearby quarters, joining those already in service. Each brings a quiet presence, each steps into a role that has been repeated countless times before. Together, they form a rhythm of movement that feels steady and balanced, like breathing that never needs to be spoken aloud. Inside the inner chambers, final morning rituals continue. The statues are anointed with oils that carry a faint, calming scent. Incense is lit again, rising slowly in thin streams of smoke that drift upward and disappear into unseen heights. The light inside these rooms remains soft, shaped by both flame and early sun filtering through small openings in stone. Outside, the day continues to grow warmer. The priests will soon move into the long middle hours of their work, where study, offerings, and maintenance fill the time until evening approaches. But for now, in this early portion of the day, everything remains gentle. the world feels held in balance between night and full daylight. And as the temple stands quietly in the growing warmth of the sun, life inside it continues with calm precision, each moment flowing into the next without interruption, like a river that never rushes, only moves forward in its own steady, ancient way. As the sun rises higher over the land of ancient Egypt, the temple settles into the steady rhythm of the day. The early coolness of morning slowly fades, replaced by a gentle warmth that spreads across stone courtyards and narrow passageways. Shadows that once stretched long and thin now shrink closer to the base of columns and walls, as if retreating into the quiet places where they will wait again for evening. Inside the temple, the priests continue their work without interruption. There is no sense of beginning or ending between tasks. Everything flows softly into the next, like water moving through channels carved long ago by careful hands. A ritual is completed, and another begins. A chamber is cleansed, and another is prepared. Time here does not feel divided. It simply continues. In the inner sanctuaries, the air still carries the faint scent of incense. It clings gently to the stone, to the linen garments, to the carved figures that stand silently along the walls. The priests move through this space with quiet familiarity. Their steps are slow and measured, never rushed, never careless. Even after many years of service, there is still a sense of careful attention in everything they do, as if each action must remain aligned with something unseen but deeply respected. One priest moves along a narrow corridor carrying a small vessel of water. The sound of it shifting inside the clay is soft, almost unnoticeable. He passes another priest who is adjusting linen coverings on a sacred object. They exchange no words, only a brief lowering of the eyes in acknowledgement. Their understanding does not need speech. It exists in routine, in repetition, in the shared memory of countless mornings like this one. Outside the deepest chambers, the temple opens into wider courtyards where light falls more freely. Here, the heat of the day begins to settle more fully. The stone underfoot grows warmer. Bare feet in sandals feel the change with each step. Yet even this warmth is not uncomfortable. It is familiar. It belongs to the cycle of life along the Nile. Scribes continue their quiet work in shaded areas. Scrolls of papyrus lie carefully arranged on low tables. The scratching of reed pens continues at a steady pace, sometimes pausing, then resuming again. Records are kept of offerings, of grain stores, of cloth, and oil and water that pass through the temple every day. There is a calm precision in their writing, as though each symbol carries its own small weight in maintaining the balance of life here. A breeze moves through the courtyard, carrying with it the scent of dust and distant water. Somewhere beyond the temple walls, the Nile continues its slow movement. Boats drift along its surface, their sails catching light wind. Fishermen check their nets again, pulling in small catches that will feed families later in the day. Farmers adjust their tools and bend once more into the fields. Life outside the temple continues in its own rhythm, separate but never truly disconnected. Within the temple kitchens, work has become more active now that the morning has passed. Bread has finished baking and is being carefully stored in woven baskets. Water jars are refilled from larger containers brought in earlier. Simple meals are prepared not only for the priests but also for workers and servants within the complex. The sound of grinding grain, the soft clatter of clay bowls, and the occasional murmur of voices blend together into a low background hum. Even here, there is no urgency. Everything is done in a way that feels steady, almost practiced to the point of silence. Hands move with experience. Movements are repeated from memory rather than instruction. The temple functions like a living pattern, one that has been followed for generations. Back in the inner sanctuaries, the priests begin another cycle of care around the sacred statues. The figures of the gods are treated as present beings, not distant symbols. Water is poured slowly, as if to refresh something living. Oils are applied with gentle hands. Cloth is adjusted so that it falls neatly and evenly. Offerings of bread, fruit, and incense are placed before them in quiet arrangement. There is a stillness in these moments that feels deep and steady. The light from small openings in the stone walls shifts slowly across the figures, making them appear almost warm, almost touched by life. The priests do not speak. They breathe quietly, focus deeply, and continue their work as they have done many times before. Outside these chambers, the temple corridors remain active with soft movement. A group of younger attendants passes through carrying folded linens. Another group moves in the opposite direction with empty vessels that will be refilled. The sound of sandals against stone is constant but gentle, like the rhythm of slow rain. As the day moves forward, the heat outside grows stronger. The sun now sits higher in the sky, casting bright light over the land. Within the temple, thick stone walls help keep the inner spaces cooler, but even here, the presence of the sun is felt. Light filters through openings in soft shafts, illuminating dust particles that drift lazily in the air. In quieter corners of the temple, some priests take brief moments of rest. They sit on low stone benches or woven mats, resting their hands in their laps. Their eyes remain open or half closed, not in sleep, but in stillness. These pauses are not separate from their duty. They are part of it. Rest is woven into work just as silence is woven into sound. One priest sits near a column, listening to the faint movement of air through the courtyard. His thoughts do not seem hurried. They move slowly, like water settling after disturbance. He observes the rhythm of the day without needing to shape it. Around him, life continues gently. In another part of the temple, a small group gathers for study. Scrolls are unrolled carefully. Symbols are reviewed. Meanings are spoken in low, even voices. There is no argument or tension, only steady reflection. Knowledge here is not rushed. It is preserved, repeated, and passed along with patience. Outside, the world of the Nile continues its slow unfolding. Boats move in quiet lines along the water, carrying goods between villages. Workers rest in shaded areas before returning to labor. Children move through narrow streets, their voices faint in the distance. The heat of midday presses gently across the land, encouraging stillness where possible. Within the temple, this same stillness is mirrored. The pace of activity slows slightly, not because work has ended, but because the rhythm naturally softens under the weight of the day. Incense is lit again in one of the inner chambers. The smoke rises in thin, curling lines, disappearing into the upper shadows of stone ceilings. The scent is faint but calming, blending with the warmth of the air. Light and smoke together create a quiet atmosphere that feels suspended, as if time itself has become softer. The priests continue their duties. There is no final task that marks completion. Instead, there is repetition. Care is given, and then given again. Attention is maintained, and then gently renewed. The temple lives through this ongoing cycle, steady and unbroken. As the afternoon begins to approach, the light outside shifts slightly. It grows more golden, more angled. Shadows begin to stretch again, slowly returning after their retreat. The heat remains, but it begins to feel less sharp, more settled. Inside, the priests prepare for the later rituals that will come as the day turns toward evening. Some move to check storage rooms. Others prepare offerings for the next cycle. A few walk slowly through corridors, observing the condition of sacred spaces, ensuring that everything remains in proper order. There is a deep quietness in these hours. Not silence exactly, but a softened sound of life continuing without disturbance. And as the temple stands within the steady flow of the afternoon, it feels less like a building and more like a breathing presence, one that moves gently with the rhythm of the sun, the river, and the slow passage of time itself. As the afternoon settles more deeply over the land of Egypt, the temple begins to feel quieter in a different way. Not empty, not still, but softened by the weight of heat and light. The sun now leans lower than before, though it is still strong, pouring itself across the wide courtyards and pressing gently against the pale stone walls. Inside the temple, the rhythm of work continues, but it has changed shape. The urgency of the morning is long gone. What remains is steady, familiar motion. Movements are slower now, more deliberate, as if every action must pass through the warmth of the day before it can be completed. In the shaded corridors, priests move with unhurried steps. Linen garments cling lightly to their bodies in the heat, but there is no complaint, no rush to escape the warmth. This is simply part of the cycle they know well. The temple has always existed under the sun, and so have they. In one of the inner chambers, the air feels cooler, held back by thick stone walls that have absorbed centuries of heat and silence. A priest sits quietly near a low table, reviewing scrolls that have already been studied many times before. The papyrus is worn in places, its edges softened by handling. The writing upon it is steady, carefully preserved. He traces lines with his eyes, not speaking, only absorbing the familiar patterns of knowledge. Nearby, another priest prepares small offerings for the evening cycle. Bread is broken gently into portions. Fruit is arranged in simple order. Incense is measured carefully, ready for later use. Each movement is unhurried. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. Even the smallest task is treated with quiet attention. Outside, in the open courtyards, the light is bright but no longer harsh. It has become more golden, as if softened by time itself. The stone beneath bare feet carries the warmth of the entire day, holding it like memory. Shadows stretch again, longer now, slowly reaching across walkways and columns. A faint breeze moves through the temple grounds. It carries the distant scent of the river, of dry earth, and of plants warmed under long sun. This breeze is not strong, but it is welcome. It passes through open spaces gently, touching linen garments and stirring loose strands of dust from stone surfaces. In the kitchens, the rhythm has slowed. The busiest part of food preparation has passed, and now there is only maintenance, quiet work, and preparation for later. Water jars are checked. Grain stores are adjusted. Simple meals are set aside for those still working within the temple. The sound of grinding has faded. What remains is the soft clink of clay, the rustle of baskets, and occasional quiet speech. Even here, exhaustion is not spoken of directly. It is simply understood in the slower movements, in the longer pauses between actions, in the way hands rest briefly before continuing. In another part of the temple complex, scribes continue their work under shaded awnings. Their posture is steady but relaxed. Ink is mixed carefully, reed pens dipped and lifted with practiced control. The records they keep do not change much from day to day, yet they are still written with care. Each entry matters in the larger structure of temple life, even if it seems small on its own. Beyond the temple walls, the wider world also begins to soften under the afternoon sun. Farmers move more slowly through their fields now, taking breaks beneath sparse shade when they can find it. Water is carried carefully from storage jars. Animals rest in stillness, their movements reduced to occasional shifting or slow breathing. Along the river, boats drift without urgency, guided more by current than by force. The Nile itself continues its steady movement, unchanged by heat or time. It reflects the sky in long, shimmering lines that shift slightly with each ripple of water. Life along its banks is tied closely to this rhythm, and everything seems to follow its quiet guidance. Inside the temple, the priests prepare for the later part of the day's ritual cycle. This preparation is not loud or ceremonial in a visible sense. It is quiet, almost invisible to the casual eye. Cloths are checked again. Sacred spaces are cleaned of dust that has gathered during the day. Lamps are refilled with oil. Incense is placed in readiness. Everything is arranged so that when the time comes, nothing will be rushed. In one of the inner sanctuaries, light falls in thin, angled lines through small openings in the stone. Dust floats gently through these beams, moving slowly as if suspended. The statues of the gods stand unchanged, their presence steady in the dimness. The priests move around them with care, their actions calm and precise. There is a sense here of continuity, of something that does not begin or end but simply continues through time. The priests do not think in terms of individual days in these moments. They think in cycles, in patterns that repeat with slight variation but remain essentially the same. As the afternoon grows deeper, a few priests step outside into the courtyard to breathe the warmer air. They stand quietly near columns, looking out toward the distant horizon. The sun is beginning its slow descent now, though it is still high enough to fill the land with light. From here, they can see beyond the temple walls. The fields appear calm, softened by heat. The river glimmers steadily. Small figures of workers move like distant shadows, their forms blending into the landscape. Everything feels far away yet still connected. A priest rests his hand lightly against the stone of a column. It is warm from the sun. He does not speak. There is no need. The silence around him is full, not empty. It carries the weight of the entire day. Inside again, in cooler interior corridors, younger attendants move through their tasks. They carry water, adjust linens, and prepare spaces for the evening rituals that will soon begin. Their movements are careful, guided by training and repetition. They learn not through instruction alone, but through observation, through quiet imitation of those who have served longer. The temple feels, in these hours, like a place suspended between two moments of time. The intensity of midday has passed, but the stillness of night has not yet arrived. Everything is in gentle transition. Even the sounds reflect this change. The sharpness of morning activity is gone. The loudest moments of labor have faded. What remains is a soft layering of small sounds, footsteps on stone, the faint rustle of cloth, the distant call of birds, and the subtle movement of wind through open courtyards. As the sun begins its gradual descent, light inside the temple changes again. It becomes longer, more angled, casting warm tones across walls and floors. Shadows deepen slightly, gathering in corners and under archways. The air begins to feel less heavy, though still warm. Priests move with renewed attention as evening approaches. The rhythm of the temple shifts once more, gently preparing for the rituals that will close the day. Lamps are checked again. Offerings are arranged with care. Sacred objects are brought into readiness. Yet even in this preparation, there is no rush. Everything is done slowly, as if time itself allows space for each movement to be completed fully before the next begins. Outside, the world beyond the temple also begins to soften toward evening. Workers begin to turn homeward. The fields grow quieter. The river reflects deeper tones of gold and amber as the sun lowers. The long heat of the day begins to ease, though it still lingers in the air and stone. Inside the temple, the priests continue their steady preparation, moving like quiet figures within a larger rhythm that has no clear beginning and no final end. And as the light slowly shifts toward evening, the temple remains in its calm state of balance, holding the last warmth of the day within its ancient walls, waiting gently for night to arrive. As evening begins to approach the land of Egypt, the light across the temple changes in a slow and almost unnoticeable way. The sharp brightness of midday is gone now, replaced by a softer glow that spreads gently over stone, sand, and water. The sun lowers toward the horizon, and everything it touches seems to grow calmer, as if the world itself is preparing to rest. Inside the temple, this shift is felt more than it is seen. The priests move with renewed focus, not hurried, but attentive in a deeper way. The long afternoon of quiet labor is now giving way to the evening cycle, and each movement becomes part of a familiar closing rhythm. Lamps are brought out and checked. Wicks are trimmed carefully. Oil is poured in small, steady amounts. Every action is precise, repeated exactly as it has been for many generations. The corridors grow slightly dimmer as the sun's angle changes. Shadows stretch longer now, slipping across carved walls and floor stones. The same hallways that felt open and bright earlier in the day now feel more enclosed, more intimate. The temple begins to turn inward, as if drawing its breath closer before night arrives. In the inner chambers, sacred spaces are prepared once more. The statues of the gods are tended with slow care. Water is offered again, this time with the softness of evening stillness in the air. Cloth is adjusted, smoothing folds that have shifted during the day. Incense is prepared, but not yet lit. Everything waits in readiness, as though the temple itself is holding a quiet pause before the final rituals begin. The priests move with familiar discipline. Their faces remain calm, their expressions steady. There is no urgency in their work, only a deep sense of continuation. The same rituals have been performed countless times before, and yet each evening still carries its own quiet importance. Outside the inner chambers, the temple feels different now. The heat of the day has begun to loosen its grip. The air is still warm, but it no longer presses heavily against stone and skin. A gentle breeze moves through open courtyards, carrying the faint scent of the river and the cooling earth. Dust settles more easily now, no longer rising with every movement. In shaded areas, scribes finish their final entries of the day. Read pen slow, then pause. Scrolls are rolled carefully and placed aside. Ink is sealed. Work is not abandoned abruptly, but concluded with quiet order. Even the ending of tasks is part of the rhythm here, never sudden, always gentle. Nearby, servants move through the corridors carrying the last of the day's water and food. Their steps are slower now, their shoulders slightly relaxed. The intensity of labor has softened. Conversations, when they happen, are brief and low. The temple begins to sound different in the evening, less active, more reflective. In the courtyards, the light becomes golden and deep. Stone surfaces glow softly under the setting sun. Columns cast long, elegant shadows that stretch across walkways like quiet lines drawn by time itself. The sky beyond the temple walls shifts into warm tones of amber and pale orange. Everything feels stretched and slow, as if the world is gently extending the final moments of daylight. Some priests step outside briefly, standing in the open air to observe the changing sky. They do not speak. They simply watch. The river in the distance reflects the sunset in broken lines of light, moving slowly with the current. Boats that were active earlier in the day are now returning to shore, their silhouettes faint against the glowing water. A sense of calm begins to settle over everything. Inside the temple kitchens, the final preparations of the day are completed. Food is set aside for those who will remain within the complex overnight. Utensils are cleaned. Surfaces are wiped down. Fires are reduced, their intensity lowered to gentle embers. The strong activity of the morning and midday has faded into a quieter state of maintenance. The soundscape of the temple has changed completely now. Where there was once the steady rhythm of labor, there is now only soft movement and occasional sound. A footstep on stone. The rustle of linen. The faint movement of air through narrow openings. Even silence feels fuller now, as if it carries more weight in the evening light. In the inner sanctuaries, the final rituals of the day begin to take shape. Incense is lit slowly, its smoke rising in thin, curling streams. The scent spreads gently through enclosed spaces, blending with the warm air and the faint traces of earlier offerings. Lamps are brought closer, their light steady and small, flickering softly against carved stone. The priests gather in quiet formation. Their movements are coordinated but unspoken. Each step, each gesture, follows a pattern known deeply through repetition. There is a sense of closing, not ending, but settling. The temple does not stop its life, it simply shifts into another form of it. The statues of the gods stand in the dim glow, unchanged, eternal in their stillness. Around them, the priests perform the evening rites with careful attention. Water is poured. Offerings are placed. Words are spoken in low, steady tones that blend into the atmosphere rather than rise above it. Outside the chambers, the rest of the temple becomes quieter still. Hallways that were once filled with steady movement are now mostly empty. Only a few figures pass through, tending to final tasks. Doors are gently closed. Storage areas are secured. Lamps are adjusted to remain lit through the night. The entire structure feels like it is settling into itself, layer by layer, as evening deepens. Outside the temple walls, the land of Egypt also slows. Fields are still. Workers have returned to their homes. The river continues its movement, but even it appears calmer under the fading light. Birds settle into resting places. The wind becomes softer, less frequent. The heat of the day finally loosens, leaving behind a warm, lingering stillness. Inside the temple, night is now close. The sky beyond the courtyards darkens gradually, shifting from gold to deep blue. The first faint stars begin to appear, scattered across the upper sky like quiet points of light. Their presence feels distant yet steady, watching over everything without movement or sound. Priests begin to withdraw from the outer areas of the temple, moving toward inner resting spaces. Their steps are unhurried. There is no sense of completion in the ordinary sense, only transition. The work of the day has become the memory of the day, still present, still part of them. In some chambers, lamps continue to burn softly through the night. In others, the light is reduced to a gentle glow. The temple does not fall into darkness, but into a controlled, peaceful dimness that matches the tone of the evening. The final rituals conclude quietly. Incense smoke thins and fades. Offerings are left in their places. The statues remain in stillness, as they always have, as they always will. The priests step back slowly, their movements calm and practiced, and the sacred spaces are left undisturbed. There is a long moment of quiet. Not emptiness, but presence without movement. The temple now rests in its nighttime form, no longer active in the way of the day, but still alive with quiet breath. Lamps flicker gently in corners. Shadows settle into place. The air grows cooler, softer, carrying the deep calm of the Nile night. And as darkness fully arrives, the temple remains steady within it, holding the memory of the day in silence, while the ancient world outside drifts slowly into sleep. Night settles fully over the land of Egypt, not suddenly, but in the slow way it always arrives along the Nile. The last traces of sunset fade from the horizon, leaving behind a deep blue sky scattered with steady stars. The air cools gently now, carrying the relief of the long day's heat as it finally loosens its hold on stone, sand, and river. Inside the temple, the world feels smaller and quieter. Lamps burn in soft clusters along corridors and within select chambers, their light warm and steady. They do not chase away the darkness completely. Instead, they shape it, making it softer, more familiar, like a presence that belongs here. Shadows move gently along carved walls, never sharp, never threatening, only shifting with the small movements of flame. Most of the day's activity has ended, but the temple is never truly still. A few priests remain awake through the night, as they always do. Their role is not urgency, but continuity. They walk slowly through the corridors, checking that lamps remain lit, that sacred spaces are undisturbed, that everything continues in its proper state of order. Their footsteps are light against stone, almost blending into the silence itself. In the inner rooms, the atmosphere is calm and contained. The statues of the gods stand in dim, steady light. They are not touched now, not dressed or washed, only observed in quiet presence. The air here carries the faint scent of incense that still lingers from earlier rituals. It is no longer strong, but it remains, like memory held in stone and fabric. A priest sits quietly near one of the inner walls. His posture is relaxed, his hands resting loosely in his lap. He is not sleeping, but neither is he fully active in thought. This in-between state is common in the temple at night, where silence allows the mind to slow down naturally. The flickering lamp beside him casts soft light across his face, warming the edges of his features. Elsewhere in the temple, small movements continue. A door is adjusted gently so it closes more securely. A lamp is refilled with oil so it will last until morning. A woven mat is straightened in a resting area. Each action is simple, almost quiet enough to disappear into the air. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is loud. Even maintenance becomes part of the calm. Outside the inner sanctuaries, the corridors are mostly empty now. The long passageways that were filled with steady movement earlier in the day now hold only the faint echo of their own structure. Stone walls, carved pillars, and shallow alcoves stand in soft darkness broken only by occasional light. The temple feels larger at night, as if its spaces expand when human movement becomes rare. The breeze outside has strengthened slightly with the cooling land. It moves through open courtyards and narrow gaps, slipping into the temple in gentle waves. It carries the scent of the river at night, a mix of water, mud, and distant vegetation. This scent is subtle but constant, reminding those within the temple of the life flowing just beyond its walls. Far outside, the Nile continues its slow, uninterrupted movement. Its surface reflects the sky in broken pieces of starlight, shifting with every small ripple. Boats that traveled during the day are now still along the banks, their forms dark and resting. Villages along the river have grown quiet, their lights dimming one by one. The world beyond the temple has also entered its night rhythm, mirroring the calm within. Inside the temple, time feels less defined now. Without the sun marking its progress, the hours become softer, less structured. The priests who remain awake move according to habit and need rather than schedule. One passes through a corridor to check a lamp. Another sits briefly in a shaded alcove. Another walks slowly across a courtyard, observing the sky above the temple walls. The stars are now more visible. They appear steady and unmoving, though the world beneath them continues its quiet motion. Their light is faint but constant, spreading across the sky like a gentle pattern. The priests do not study them in this moment. They simply exist beneath them, as they have always done. In a small resting chamber, a few attendants lie on woven mats. Their sleep is light, shaped by years of routine. The temple never becomes fully silent even at night, so their rest is woven into its sound rather than separated from it. The faint footsteps of others, the distant flicker of lamps, the occasional soft movement of air, all of it becomes part of the background they sleep within. In another area, a priest pauses near a doorway, looking out into the courtyard. The night air is cooler here, and it feels gentle against the skin. The stone beneath his feet holds the last warmth of the day, slowly fading. Above him, the sky is wide and deep, filled with stars that seem to stretch endlessly beyond what the eye can hold. He does not move for a long moment. There is no need to. Inside the temple, the sense of order remains even in stillness. Everything has its place, even in darkness. Lamps are placed where they must be. Doors are closed where they should be. Sacred spaces remain undisturbed. The structure of the temple holds steady, like a breath that never fully releases. Deeper within the inner chambers, the statues of the gods remain in quiet presence. Their forms are partially hidden in shadow, partially revealed by soft lamplight. They do not change. They do not move. And yet, within the calm of night, their presence feels even more still, as if the entire temple has adjusted itself around their silence. A priest passes through this space slowly, his footsteps nearly soundless. He does not stop. He does not perform ritual now. He simply observes, ensuring that all remains as it should be. His movement is unbroken and gentle, like part of the temple's own breathing. Outside, the river wind strengthens slightly again, brushing through palm trees and reeds along the banks. It carries a faint coolness into the night, touching the edges of villages and fields, then drifting onward. The Nile continues its endless path, unchanged by day or night, carrying life forward in its steady flow. Inside the temple, the night deepens further. More lamps are dimmed to conserve oil. Some corridors are left in near darkness, lit only by faint reflections from distant chambers. The sound of movement becomes even more rare. What remains is presence, quiet, steady presence. A priest settles near a low wall in one of the interior spaces, resting but not fully asleep. His breathing is slow and even. His awareness is soft, open to the surrounding silence. The temple around him continues its quiet existence, neither fully awake nor fully asleep, but something in between. Time passes in this way, gently and without emphasis. No moment feels sharply separated from the next. The night moves forward as a continuous, quiet flow. Lamps flicker. Shadows shift. Air cools. Stars remain steady above the open courtyards. And within the ancient structure, the temple continues to rest in its own nighttime rhythm, holding the memory of the day in silence while the world outside drifts further into deep, calm darkness. The night deepens further now, and the silence across Egypt becomes more complete. Not empty, but settled. The kind of silence that feels like it has weight, like it rests gently on the land rather than surrounds it. The Nile continues its slow movement under the stars, but even its sound is distant now, softened by the cool night air. Along its banks, reeds sway faintly, and small ripples catch the starlight in thin, Broken lines. Inside the temple, the final layer of night begins to take hold. The lamps that remain lit burn with smaller flames now, their oil slowly thinning after hours of steady use. Their light is no longer bright. It is soft, almost sleepy, casting warm halos against stone walls and fading into corners where darkness gathers without resistance. Most movement has stopped completely. The priests who remain awake do so in quiet rotation, tending only what must be tended. A lamp is checked. A corridor is walked once more. A sacred space is observed briefly in passing. Each action is slow and minimal, as if even the smallest disturbance should be avoided unless necessary. The temple feels larger at this hour, its spaces stretching into deeper stillness. Corridors that were familiar in daylight now feel longer, shaped by shadows that soften edges and blur distance. Doorways appear quieter, not because they have changed, but because the world around them has slowed. In the inner chambers, the statues of the gods stand unchanged in the dim light. Their forms are partly visible, partly hidden, as if they exist between presence and shadow. The air here is cool now, carrying only faint traces of earlier incense. Nothing new is added. Nothing is taken away. The space simply remains as it is, held in quiet balance. A priest moves slowly through this chamber, his steps measured and soft. He does not perform ritual now. He does not speak. His task is only to pass through, to ensure that nothing has shifted, nothing has been disturbed. His presence is brief, respectful, and then gone again into the corridor beyond. Outside these inner rooms, the temple has entered its deepest nighttime stillness. The courtyards are empty. The stone pathways lie undisturbed beneath the open sky. Lamps placed along walls flicker gently, some nearly fading before being tended again. The breeze moves more freely now, passing through open spaces with a cool touch that carries the memory of the river. Above everything, the stars remain steady. They fill the sky with quiet light, distant and unchanging. From within the temple, they are seen through open courtyards and between columns, framed by ancient architecture that has stood beneath them for countless nights before this one. Inside a small resting chamber, several priests sleep. Their bodies are still, their breathing slow. The mats beneath them are simple, woven from plant fibers. There is no softness beyond what has been made through habit and time. And yet their rest is steady. The temple itself seems to hold them gently within its structure, as if even the stone understands the need for pause. Nearby, another priest sits awake, his back resting lightly against a wall. He does not struggle against sleep. He allows it to come slowly if it will. His eyes remain half open, watching the faint glow of a nearby lamp. His thoughts are quiet, drifting without direction, softened by the rhythm of the night. Time passes without urgency. There is no need for measurement here. No marking of hours. Only the gradual deepening of calm. In the outer corridors, the last of the nightly patrols move with extreme quiet. Their footsteps are nearly soundless. They pass through familiar routes, checking that doors remain secure, that lamps continue to burn where needed, that sacred objects remain undisturbed in their places. Everything is stable. Everything is as it should be. The temple at night is not inactive. It is simply reduced to its essential form. A breathing structure of stone and silence, holding its shape in darkness. Outside, the wind shifts slightly. It moves across the river, over fields now resting under cool air, and into the distant edges of villages where sleep has already taken hold. It reaches the temple walls and passes through small openings, stirring the faint scent of stone and oil and lingering incense. Inside one of the inner sanctuaries, a lamp finally burns low enough that its flame trembles. A priest nearby notices and gently replenishes it. The movement is small, careful. The flame strengthens again, steadying into a calm glow. Shadows adjust softly in response, shifting without resistance. No sound accompanies this change. Only light, and the quiet understanding that the night must continue undisturbed. The priest remains for a moment longer, then steps away. He walks through the corridor slowly, returning to his place of rest or observation. Around him, the temple continues its silent existence. Walls hold their warmth from earlier in the day. Floors remain cool. Air moves gently through open spaces. Above, the sky has deepened further into midnight. The stars feel more numerous now, scattered across vast darkness like a soft pattern without end. They do not change, yet their presence feels more noticeable in the stillness, as if the world has become quiet enough to fully see them. Inside the temple, even the sense of time feels suspended. There is no morning yet. No return of activity. Only this stretch of night, unfolding slowly and evenly, like a long breath held in calm air. A final priest moves through a distant corridor, his presence barely marking the space he passes through. He pauses briefly near an open archway, looking out once more at the night sky. The air is cooler now than at any other point in the day. It carries a softness that belongs only to deep night. The river is invisible from here, but its presence is felt in the air, steady and near. He does not linger long. He turns back inside, and the temple remains as it was, quiet, ordered, resting within its own ancient rhythm. And as midnight settles fully over the Nile, the temple continues to exist in stillness, holding the night gently within its walls, while the world outside drifts deeper into sleep beneath the endless, silent stars. The night has now reached its deepest point. Everything across Egypt feels slower, softer, almost suspended in a quiet that stretches far beyond sound. The Nile moves with the same steady patience it always has, but even its presence feels distant under the weight of midnight. The wind is gentle now, barely more than a passing breath across fields, rooftops, and temple stone. Inside the temple, time feels almost dissolved. There are no sharp moments here anymore, only a continuous stillness that flows from one hour into the next without clear division. Lamps burn low in some places, steady in others. Their light is small, but it holds the darkness gently, shaping it rather than pushing it away. Most priests are now resting. In simple chambers and quiet corners, bodies lie still on woven mats. Sleep is not deep for all of them. It comes in layers, sometimes light and shifting, sometimes heavier and calm. The temple does not become fully silent even at night, so rest is always shared with faint sounds: the distant flicker of a lamp, the soft movement of air through stone corridors, the occasional shift of someone turning in sleep. And yet, everything feels peaceful. Even the sounds belong to the silence. A few priests remain awake, as they always do, carrying the quiet responsibility of the night. They move without urgency, their steps almost disappearing into the stone beneath them. Their presence is more like a continuation of the temple itself than separate activity. One walks slowly along a corridor lined with carved pillars. The shadows here are deep, shaped by lantern light placed far apart. As he passes, the light catches briefly on linen fabric, on stone carvings worn smooth by time, then fades again as he moves forward. He does not stop. There is no need to. Everything is already in order. In the inner sanctuary, the air is cooler than earlier in the evening. The final traces of incense from the day have long since settled into the walls. What remains now is only faint memory in scent, barely noticeable unless one stands still for a long moment. The statues of the gods remain in their places, unmoving, partially hidden in shadow. They are not tended now. There is nothing to tend. Only presence remains. A priest pauses briefly at the edge of the chamber. He does not enter fully. He simply observes from where he stands. His gaze moves slowly across the space, as if confirming what he already knows without needing to see it. The temple is as it should be. Everything is in place. Everything is still. Outside these sacred rooms, the corridors are nearly empty. The long passageways feel wider in the darkness, though they have not changed. It is only the absence of movement that creates this feeling. Lamps placed at intervals along the walls burn with small, steady flames, marking the path through the temple like quiet points of warmth. Beyond the temple walls, the world rests deeply. Villages are dark now, their fires reduced to embers or extinguished entirely. Fields lie still under the night sky. Animals are quiet, their movements minimal. Even the riverbank feels calm, with only the faintest sound of water shifting against shore. The Nile continues, unchanged. It does not hurry. It does not pause. It simply moves, as it always has, through night and day alike. Inside the temple, the night reaches its most silent stretch. Even the priests who remain awake move less now. Patrols are slower, more spaced out. There is no need for frequent checks. The temple has settled into stability. Their role becomes almost symbolic at this hour, a reminder that life continues even in deep stillness. A lamp flickers briefly in a side corridor. A small adjustment is made. Oil is added. The flame steadies again. The action is simple, practiced, almost instinctive. Then the priest continues on, leaving the light behind him to glow quietly in the dark. In one of the resting chambers, a soft shift occurs as someone turns in sleep. The sound is faint, quickly absorbed back into silence. No one stirs in response. The temple accepts these small movements as part of its nighttime rhythm. Rest, like waking, belongs here equally. The air grows cooler still. Stone that held warmth during the day has now fully released it. Surfaces feel neutral, neither warm nor cold, simply present. The breeze that moves through small openings carries a gentle crispness, brushing through corridors without resistance. Above, the sky remains wide and full. Stars are steady in their positions, their light unchanged but more noticeable now against the depth of night. They appear not close or distant, but simply there, constant, unblinking, part of a larger calm that stretches beyond thought. Inside the temple, a final priest completes another slow circuit through the corridors. He walks without sound, passing doorways, alcoves, and resting spaces. His presence is quiet enough that it feels almost like part of the architecture itself. He pauses occasionally, not out of concern, but out of habit, confirming stillness where stillness already exists. Everything remains undisturbed. Everything continues in its quiet form. As he moves, the temple feels even more like a living structure that breathes without effort. Not alive in motion, but alive in continuity. Holding its shape through night as it does through day. Eventually, he reaches a familiar point in his path and stops. For a moment, he stands in silence, listening to nothing in particular. There is no expectation of sound. Only awareness of space, of air, of stillness that surrounds him completely. Then he turns and begins walking again. Slowly, he returns toward the inner rest areas, leaving the corridors behind him unchanged. The temple remains as it is. Lamps flicker gently in their places. Shadows rest against walls. Stone holds the memory of the day without speaking it. The Nile continues its quiet movement beyond the walls, carrying the world forward even as everything within seems to pause. And deep in the center of the night, the ancient temple of Egypt continues its silent existence, steady and unchanged, resting beneath the stars while the world outside drifts further into the softest part of sleep. The night does not change quickly in Egypt. It deepens in small steps, almost imperceptible, as if time itself is careful not to disturb the stillness it has created. The sky remains dark and wide, filled with steady stars that seem to hold their positions without effort. The air over the land is cool now, carrying the quiet breath of the river and the distant memory of daytime heat. Inside the temple, this deep night feels almost like a pause that has lasted a long time. Not frozen. Not empty. Just held. Lamps continue to glow in scattered points throughout the complex. Their light is soft and low, enough to guide a hand, enough to mark a path, but never enough to push back the darkness completely. Instead, they exist together, light and shadow sharing the same space without conflict. Most of the temple is asleep now. The priests who rest do so in simple stillness. Their bodies lie on woven mats, their breathing slow and even. The stone beneath them is firm, but familiar. Sleep here is not separate from the temple's rhythm. It is part of it, like everything else. A few remain awake. Their presence is quiet and spaced far apart, as if even thought has been softened by the night. One sits near a dim lamp in a narrow corridor, not doing anything in particular, only remaining alert in the most gentle sense of the word. Another stands briefly near an archway. Very slowly, almost too slowly to notice, the night begins to change. The darkness over Egypt is still deep, and the stars still fill the sky, but somewhere far beyond the eastern horizon, the world has begun its quiet turn toward morning. Nothing brightens yet. Nothing moves suddenly. The change is subtle, carried only in the feeling of the air and the long patience of time itself. Inside the temple, the stillness remains unbroken. The corridors are quiet, the lamps soft and low. Shadows continue to rest against walls and pillars, stretching across floors worn smooth by countless footsteps over countless years. The temple seems to exist outside of time in these final hours before dawn, holding itself in perfect calm. Most of the priests remain asleep. Their breathing is slow and steady in the dim resting chambers. Some lie curled slightly beneath light linen coverings. Others rest flat on woven mats, their hands relaxed at their sides. The stone beneath them has cooled fully now, carrying none of the heat from the previous day. The air is gentle. It drifts softly through narrow openings in the walls, bringing with it the cool scent of the Nile before sunrise. There is moisture in the air now, faint but noticeable, rising from the river and settling quietly across the land. A priest who remained awake through much of the night sits near a fading lamp. His eyes are heavy, though peaceful. He watches the flame without urgency, noticing how it bends slightly whenever the breeze reaches the corridor. He does not think deeply at this hour. Thoughts come slowly now, softened by silence and fatigue. Nearby, another priest begins to stir from sleep. Not fully awake yet, he shifts gently on his mat and opens his eyes halfway. For a long moment, he remains still, listening to the quiet around him. The temple feels calm, unchanged, familiar. He closes his eyes again briefly before finally sitting upright with slow, careful movement. There is no sudden waking in the temple. Morning begins gradually here, just as night arrived gradually before it. In the inner sanctuaries, the sacred chambers remain dim and quiet. The statues of the gods stand in shadow, their forms barely touched by the weak light of nearby lamps. The air inside these rooms feels cool and still, carrying the silence of many uninterrupted hours. A priest walks softly through the sanctuary corridor. His sandals make almost no sound against the stone floor. He pauses near one of the lamps, adjusting the wick gently before continuing onward. The flame steadies. Light spreads slightly wider across the wall carvings, revealing shapes and symbols that seem to emerge slowly from darkness. Outside the temple walls, the Nile continues its endless movement. The river is difficult to see clearly now beneath the dark sky, but its presence fills the air. Reeds along the banks sway softly in the early morning breeze. Far away, a bird calls once, briefly breaking the silence before everything becomes quiet again. The villages beyond the temple are still asleep. Mud brick homes rest in darkness, their rooftops cool beneath the fading night. Fishing boats remain tied along the riverbank. Narrow paths between homes are empty. Cooking fires have not yet been lit. The world still belongs to night, though dawn is slowly approaching. Inside the temple, more priests begin to wake. One sits quietly for several moments before standing. Another washes his face with cool water from a clay basin, the sound gentle in the silence. A third folds his sleeping mat carefully and places it aside with practiced movement. No one speaks loudly. Words at this hour are few and soft, as though the temple itself asks for quiet while night still lingers. The lamps continue to burn, though some now seem less necessary. Darkness is still present, but it no longer feels complete. Somewhere beyond the stone walls, the horizon is beginning to soften by the smallest degree. In the courtyards, the air feels especially cool now. Stone surfaces hold the freshness of night, and a faint breeze moves openly through the temple spaces. The sky overhead remains dark blue, scattered with stars, but near the far edge of the world there is the slightest suggestion of pale color beginning to gather. A priest steps into the courtyard and pauses. He looks upward first, toward the fading stars, then toward the eastern horizon beyond the temple walls. He has seen this moment countless times before. The transition between deep night and first dawn is familiar to him, yet it always carries a quiet beauty that asks nothing from anyone. He remains still for a while, breathing the cool air. Around him, the temple slowly begins to wake. More movement returns to the corridors now, though gently. Water jars are carried quietly from storage rooms. Lamps are checked and extinguished where no longer needed. Linen garments are adjusted. Sandals brush softly against stone. The rhythm of the new day is beginning, but softly, carefully, without disturbing the calm that night has left behind. In the kitchens, the first preparations of morning begin again. A small fire is lit. Grain is measured into grinding stones. Clay vessels are uncovered. The sounds are faint but steady, like distant echoes returning slowly to life. The smell of smoke begins to drift lightly into the cool air. The temple is no longer asleep, but it is not fully awake either. It exists in the quiet space between the two. In the inner sanctuaries, priests begin preparing for the first rituals of the coming day. Water is brought forward in clean vessels. Fresh linen is folded carefully. Incense is arranged but not yet lit. Each movement feels calm and practiced, shaped by repetition so old it no longer requires thought. Outside, the horizon slowly brightens. The stars nearest the east begin to fade first, disappearing one by one into the growing light. The Nile reflects this change before the land does, its dark surface turning faintly silver in places where the first traces of dawn touch the water. Birds begin to stir along the riverbanks. A breeze moves through the reeds again, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant growing fields. Somewhere beyond the temple, a worker rises from sleep inside a small mud brick home. Somewhere else, a fisherman prepares to untie his boat. Life across Egypt is beginning once more. Inside the temple, the priests continue their quiet preparations as dawn slowly approaches. The stillness of night remains present, but thinner now, gently giving way to the soft return of morning. And within the ancient stone walls, beneath the sky slowly changing from darkness into light, the daily rhythm of the temple begins again exactly as it has for generations, calm and steady as the flowing Nile beside it. The first true light of dawn arrives slowly across the land of Egypt. It spreads gently over the horizon in pale shades of silver and soft gold, touching the Nile before it reaches the fields or temple walls. The river catches the morning light in long, quiet reflections, turning from dark blue into muted bronze. Mist lingers low above the water in thin drifting layers, moving softly with the breeze. Inside the temple, the change from night to morning is fully underway now. The darkness inside the corridors begins to retreat little by little. Lamps still burn in some places, but their glow grows weaker against the growing daylight that filters through narrow openings in the stone. Shadows soften. The air feels fresher, lighter, carrying the coolness of early morning before the heat of the day begins again. The priests are awake now. Some have already washed and dressed in clean linen garments. Others move quietly through the temple, preparing the sacred spaces for the first rituals of the morning. Their movements are steady and unhurried, shaped by long practice and familiar routine. No one needs instruction. The rhythm already lives inside them. In the courtyards, the stone floors are cool beneath their sandals. A faint layer of dust shifts gently with each step. Birds call softly from somewhere beyond the temple walls, their sounds carrying through the calm air. The sky overhead grows brighter with every passing moment, though the sun itself has not yet fully risen above the horizon. A priest carries fresh water from a storage vessel toward the inner sanctuary. The clay container rests carefully against his side as he walks through the corridor. The water inside moves quietly with each step. Around him, the temple slowly brightens. Carved walls that disappeared into shadow during the night now begin to reveal their shapes once again. Nearby, another priest unfolds fresh linen cloth with careful hands. The fabric is light and smooth, woven long before this morning arrived. He folds it again with practiced precision before placing it beside other prepared offerings. Every object in the temple has its place, and every movement follows a familiar order. Outside the temple walls, the wider world is waking too. Along the Nile, fishermen begin untangling their nets in the pale morning light. Boats drift gently near the shore as ropes are loosened and wooden poles lifted into place. Farmers emerge slowly from mud brick homes carrying simple tools over their shoulders. Thin streams of smoke rise into the morning air as cooking fires are lit for the first meal of the day. The smell of bread beginning to bake drifts faintly through nearby villages. The scent mixes with cool river air and damp earth, creating the familiar smell of morning beside the Nile. Inside the temple kitchens, the first work of the day becomes more active now. Grinding stones turn steadily as grain is crushed into flour. Clay ovens warm slowly with growing heat. Water is poured carefully into bowls and storage jars. The sounds are soft but constant, forming part of the temple's gradual awakening. Servants move quietly between rooms carrying baskets, linens, and vessels. Some are still heavy with sleep, their eyes adjusting slowly to the brightness of morning. Others move with calm efficiency, already fully settled into the rhythm of work. None of them hurry. The day is long, and the temple does not rush its waking. In the inner sanctuaries, the first morning rituals begin once again. The sacred chambers feel cooler than the outer courtyards, their thick walls still holding traces of night air. Priests enter quietly carrying water, oils, and offerings. Their sandals make soft sounds against the smooth stone floor. The statues of the gods stand waiting in the dim morning light. Carefully, the priests begin the process of cleansing and preparation. Water is poured gently into basins. Linen cloth touches stone surfaces with slow precision. Oils are applied lightly, their scent faint and calming. No movement is wasted. No gesture is hurried. Everything unfolds in silence broken only by the quiet sounds of ritual itself. Outside the sanctuary, the sunlight finally reaches the upper temple walls. Golden light spreads slowly downward across columns and carved reliefs. The courtyards brighten. Shadows retreat into smaller corners. The coolness of dawn remains for now, but already the promise of coming heat can be felt resting beneath the morning air. A group of younger attendants crosses one of the open courtyards carrying fresh flowers and baskets of bread. Their footsteps echo softly between the stone columns. One glances briefly upward at the brightening sky before lowering his eyes again to the path ahead. They have done this many times before, yet the morning still carries a quiet freshness that feels new each day. Along the riverbank beyond the temple, life continues to gather momentum. Voices begin to rise faintly from nearby villages. Donkeys move slowly along dusty roads carrying sacks of grain and jars of water. Children step sleepily into narrow streets while older workers prepare for the labor ahead. The Nile reflects all of it calmly. Its waters continue their slow journey northward, untouched by the busy rhythms unfolding along its shores. Inside the temple, the atmosphere remains peaceful despite the growing activity. The priests continue their duties with calm focus. Some prepare offerings. Others organize scrolls and records for the day ahead. Scribes settle into shaded areas with reed pens and fresh papyrus, ready to begin another long day of careful writing. The temple feels fully awake now, yet it has lost none of the quietness of the night. Its calm remains woven into every corridor and courtyard. A priest pauses briefly near an open archway, watching the sunlight spread across the outer walls. Warm air begins to rise from the stone as the day slowly grows brighter. He listens for a moment to the distant sounds of the waking city beyond the temple grounds. Then, without hesitation, he turns back toward the sanctuary. The rituals continue. The routines continue. The ancient rhythm of temple life moves forward once more beneath the growing Egyptian sun, steady and unbroken, like the Nile itself flowing quietly beside the land. The morning continues to unfold slowly across the land of Egypt. The sun has now arisen fully above the horizon, though its heat is still gentle in these early hours. Golden light spreads across the Nile and the temple walls, warming the pale stone little by little. The coolness of dawn begins to fade, replaced by the familiar warmth that will grow stronger as the day moves on. Inside the temple, the rhythm of activity deepens naturally. The priests move through corridors and courtyards with steady calm, continuing tasks that have already begun many times before in countless mornings like this one. There is no sharp beginning to the day here. Morning enters gradually, blending into the final stillness of night until the temple is fully awake without anyone noticing the exact moment it happened. In the inner sanctuaries, rituals continue in soft silence. The sacred statues have been washed and dressed carefully. Fresh offerings rest before them in simple arrangement: bread, fruit, cool water, flowers gathered near the river. The faint scent of oils and incense drifts gently through the chambers, lingering in the cool air held by thick stone walls. A priest kneels briefly beside a low offering table. His movements are slow and deliberate as he adjusts a folded linen cloth. Nearby, another priest lights fresh incense. Smoke rises upward in thin pale streams, twisting softly before fading into the shadows above. The sound inside these chambers is minimal. A footstep. The quiet clink of clay. The soft movement of linen against stone. Everything else remains still. Outside the sanctuaries, the temple courtyards brighten steadily under the morning sun. Birds move between rooftops and columns, their calls echoing lightly through the open spaces. Dust stirs faintly beneath sandals as servants and attendants continue their work. The kitchens are fully active now. Grain is ground steadily between heavy stones. Dough is pressed and shaped by practiced hands. Clay ovens glow with growing heat, releasing the warm smell of baking bread into the morning air. Water jars are lifted carefully and carried between rooms, their cool surfaces damp from the freshness of the river. The workers here move in constant rhythm. Not rushed. Not slow. Simply steady. Their hands know each task before it begins. One servant wipes flour from his forearm and pauses briefly near an open doorway. Beyond the temple walls he can see the bright ribbon of the Nile shining under the sun. Boats already move along the water, their sails catching the early breeze. Soon he returns to his work without speaking. Elsewhere in the temple, scribes begin another long morning of writing and record keeping. They sit cross-legged beside low wooden desks in shaded areas where the sunlight cannot easily reach. Papyrus scrolls are unrolled carefully. Reed pens are dipped into dark ink. Their hands move with quiet precision, forming symbols that record the endless flow of offerings, supplies, names, and duties that shape daily temple life. The scratching sound of reed pens becomes part of the temple's morning atmosphere. Soft. Constant. Almost soothing. Nearby, a younger apprentice watches closely while grinding fresh ink between small stones. His eyes follow every movement carefully. Learning here happens through observation and repetition, through long hours spent near those who already know the rhythm by heart. The temple grounds continue to warm. Sunlight spreads fully across the open courtyards now, touching every column and carved wall. The pale stone reflects the brightness outward, filling the spaces with soft golden light. The air remains pleasant for the moment, though everyone knows the heavier heat will arrive later. Outside the temple walls, the city and riverbank are now alive with morning labor. Farmers walk toward distant fields carrying wooden tools over their shoulders. Merchants arrange goods beneath woven coverings to shield them from the coming sun. Fishermen pull in early catches from the river while children carry baskets through narrow dusty streets. The smell of bread, river water, smoke, and warm earth drifts through the air together. Egypt wakes fully under the growing sun. Inside the temple, however, the calm remains untouched. Even as movement increases, the atmosphere stays gentle and controlled. Voices remain low. Footsteps remain measured. No one runs. No one shouts. The temple exists within its own quieter rhythm, slightly removed from the busy world surrounding it. A priest walks slowly through one of the outer courtyards carrying a small basket of offerings. The sunlight catches the folds of his linen garment as he moves between the columns. His sandals scrape softly against the warm stone floor. He pauses briefly beneath a shaded walkway where the air remains cooler, then continues onward without haste. In another area, temple workers clean the courtyard surfaces using simple reed brooms. Dust gathers in pale clouds near the ground before settling again. The work is repetitive but calming, part of the endless care required to maintain such a vast sacred place. The workers move methodically beneath the morning light, pausing only occasionally to wipe sweat from their faces as the air slowly warms. The Nile breeze still reaches the temple from time to time. It moves through open corridors carrying the scent of water and reeds. Whenever it passes, the heat softens briefly, and the linen garments worn by priests and servants flutter gently in the moving air. Inside the inner sanctuary, another cycle of offerings begins. Fresh bread is placed carefully before the statues. Bowls of cool water reflect the dim light of the chamber. Incense continues to burn slowly, filling the room with calm fragrance that clings softly to the walls and clothing of those inside. The priests maintain the same quiet focus they carried before dawn. Nothing in their expression suggests boredom or impatience. Repetition itself has become a form of peace. The rituals do not feel endless to them. They feel stable, familiar, steady as the rising and setting of the sun. As the morning moves forward, sunlight grows stronger across the temple grounds. The coolness of dawn has almost fully disappeared now. Warmth settles onto stone floors and mud brick walls. In shaded corridors, the air remains pleasant, but the open courtyards already begin to shimmer faintly beneath the growing heat. A priest pauses beside a column and drinks slowly from a clay cup of water. The water is cool from storage jars kept deep within shaded rooms. He closes his eyes briefly as the breeze moves through the courtyard once more. Around him, the temple continues its endless rhythm of movement and stillness woven together. The Nile glimmers brightly beyond the walls. Boats drift steadily along its surface. Workers bend over green riverside fields. Smoke rises from cooking fires in the distance. And within the ancient temple, beneath the brightening Egyptian morning, the daily life of the priests continues calmly forward, carried gently by routines older than memory itself. The morning slowly moves toward midday. The sun climbs higher above Egypt, and its warmth begins to settle more heavily over the land. The pale gold light of early morning deepens into a brighter white glow that reflects strongly from temple stone and river water alike. Shadows shorten beneath columns and walls, drawing closer to the ground as the day grows fuller. Inside the temple, the rhythm continues without interruption. The priests remain calm in their movements, though the heat is becoming more noticeable now. Linen garments cling slightly to skin. Water is carried more often through the corridors. The air in open courtyards grows warmer with each passing hour, while the inner chambers remain cool and dim beneath their thick stone ceilings. In one shaded hallway, a priest walks slowly beside a line of carved pillars. The stone beneath his sandals has begun to warm. Sunlight reaches across part of the floor in bright rectangles, while the deeper interior remains wrapped in soft shadow. He carries a small clay vessel filled with scented oil, holding it carefully against his chest as he moves toward the sanctuary rooms. The smell of incense still lingers throughout the temple. Not strong now, but steady. It blends with the scent of warm stone, oil, dust, and baked bread drifting faintly from the kitchens. Together these smells form the familiar atmosphere of temple life, unchanged through countless seasons beside the Nile. In the inner sanctuaries, rituals continue in measured silence. Offerings are refreshed again. Fresh water replaces what stood earlier in the morning. Bread is carefully arranged. Fruit is placed in shallow bowls of clay and polished stone. Priests move around the sacred statues with patient attention, their gestures slow and precise. The chambers remain peaceful despite the growing heat outside. Light enters only in narrow beams, falling softly across walls covered in carved figures and symbols. Dust drifts lazily through the air where the sunlight reaches, floating slowly before disappearing again into shadow. A priest kneels briefly before one of the offering tables. He lowers his head for a quiet moment, then rises carefully, smoothing the folds of his linen garment before stepping back. Another priest passes behind him carrying fresh flowers gathered near the riverbank at dawn. Their scent is faint but fresh, bringing a small reminder of cool morning air into the enclosed room. Outside, the temple courtyards are becoming brighter and hotter. Workers move more slowly now beneath the growing sun. Servants carrying water jars pause briefly in shaded walkways before continuing onward. Reed brooms scrape gently against stone floors as cleaning continues through the outer areas of the complex. The kitchens remain busy. Bread is removed from ovens in careful batches, the smell warm and comforting in the thickening heat. Grain continues to be ground steadily by workers seated near open doorways where small breezes still occasionally pass through. One young attendant wipes sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm before lifting another basket of flour. His movements are practiced despite his fatigue. Around him, older workers continue without complaint, their rhythm steady and patient. The work here is repetitive, but deeply familiar, woven into every day of life within the temple. Outside the walls, the wider world grows brighter beneath the rising sun. Farmers work along irrigation channels beside the Nile, their feet pressing into damp earth while birds circle overhead. Merchants sit beneath woven shades in crowded market areas arranging pottery, cloth, dried fish, and baskets of grain. Donkeys move slowly along dusty roads carrying heavy loads between villages and river docks. The sounds of daily life drift faintly toward the temple. Voices. Footsteps. The creaking of wooden carts. The distant splash of water against boats. Yet inside the temple, these sounds feel softened by stone walls and shaded corridors. The sacred spaces maintain their calm even as the world outside becomes busier. In a quiet corner near one of the courtyards, a group of scribes continues their work. Papyrus scrolls rest neatly stacked beside them. Reed pens scratch steadily across the surface of the pages. Their movements remain calm and careful despite the heat gathering in the air around them. One scribe pauses to flex his fingers before dipping his pen into fresh ink again. Beside him, a younger apprentice carefully fans flies away from the writing surface using a bundle of reeds. The apprentice watches every movement closely, learning not only the symbols themselves but the patience required to preserve them properly. The temple's stone walls continue to absorb the heat of the day. In the open spaces, sunlight now feels heavy against the skin. Priests crossing the courtyards move through patches of shade whenever possible, lingering briefly beneath covered walkways where the air remains cooler. A priest carrying folded linen pauses beside a column. He lifts a clay cup of water slowly to his lips. The water is cool from deep storage jars kept in shaded rooms below ground. He drinks carefully, savoring the brief relief before continuing his path toward the sanctuary. The Nile breeze still reaches the temple from time to time, though less often now. When it arrives, it moves softly through corridors and open doorways, stirring linen garments and carrying the scent of reeds and river water into the warm stone spaces. The breeze never lasts long, but everyone notices when it comes. Inside the sacred chambers, the calm remains unchanged. The priests continue their duties with the same measured attention they carried before sunrise. Their movements do not become hurried under the heat. If anything, they grow even slower, conserving energy while maintaining the quiet dignity of ritual. The statues stand silently in the dim light. Incense curls upward in pale streams. Oil lamps flicker gently near the walls where sunlight cannot reach. Time inside these rooms feels different from the world outside. The labor of farmers, fishermen, merchants, and builders continues beyond the temple walls beneath the rising heat, but here the rhythm remains steady and contained. As the morning edges closer toward midday, the brightness over Egypt becomes almost blinding in the open spaces. The Nile flashes silver beneath the sun. Palm trees cast narrow shadows over dusty ground. Birds settle into quieter places to escape the heat. And within the temple, beneath high stone ceilings and among cool shadowed halls, the priests continue their endless daily routines with calm patience, moving gently through another ancient day beside the river. By the time the sun reaches the highest part of the sky, the heat over Egypt has become heavy and still. The brightness settles across the land like a great silent weight. The Nile glows beneath the midday light, its surface almost white in places where the sun reflects strongest. Dusty roads beyond the temple shimmer softly in the distance, and the fields near the river seem quieter now as workers slow their pace beneath the growing warmth. Inside the temple, life continues carefully within the shelter of stone walls and shaded corridors. The thick blocks of limestone hold back some of the heat, preserving pockets of cool air deep within the inner chambers. Even so, the warmth of midday reaches nearly everywhere now. Linen garments cling lightly to skin. Sandals brush against warm floors. Water becomes more precious with each passing hour. The priests continue their duties without complaint. Their movements grow slower beneath the heavy air, but never careless. The rhythm of the temple adjusts naturally to the heat, just as the river adjusts to the seasons. Nothing stops. Nothing rushes forward. Everything simply settles into a quieter pace. In one of the shaded hallways, a priest pauses beside a narrow opening in the wall. A faint breeze moves through the gap, carrying with it the scent of the Nile and damp earth from the riverside fields. He closes his eyes briefly as the cooler air touches his face, then opens them again and continues on his path through the temple. The sound of midday inside the temple is different from morning. There is less movement now. Fewer footsteps. Longer silences. Even the voices of workers and attendants have become softer beneath the heat. In the kitchens, the fires continue to burn, though more carefully tended now to avoid overwhelming the already warm rooms. Bread cools on woven trays. Clay jars of water stand in shaded corners wrapped with damp cloth to preserve their coolness for as long as possible. Workers sit briefly whenever their tasks allow it. A servant rests against a mud brick wall for a moment before lifting another basket. Another pours water slowly over his hands, letting the coolness linger against his skin before returning to work. Their exhaustion is quiet and familiar, accepted as part of life beneath the Egyptian sun. The smell of baked grain, warm clay, smoke, and stone fills the air. Outside the temple walls, labor continues across the land. Farmers bend slowly over irrigation channels, their feet sinking into damp soil beside the river. Fishermen pull their boats into shaded areas along the banks, waiting for the strongest heat to pass before returning to deeper water. Merchants in crowded market streets sit beneath woven coverings, fanning themselves lazily while flies drip through the warm air. The city itself seems slower now. Dust hangs motionless above narrow roads. Animals rest in small patches of shade. Even the birds have grown quieter beneath the midday heat. Inside the temple, the priests continue their sacred routines with calm patience. In the inner sanctuaries, the coolness remains stronger than anywhere else in the complex. Thick stone walls block much of the sun, leaving the chambers dim and peaceful despite the blazing brightness outside. A priest carefully replaces an offering bowl with fresh bread. His movements are deliberate, almost meditative. Nearby, another adjusts linen coverings draped around sacred statues. The faint scent of incense drifts upward through the still air, rising slowly before disappearing into shadowed ceilings high above. Oil lamps burn softly near the walls. Their flames seem small against the brightness waiting outside the chamber doors. A young attendant kneels quietly beside a basin of cool water. He rinses cloth carefully before wringing it out with slow hands. Beads of sweat gather along his forehead, though he works without complaint. The older priests nearby continue with the same calm expressions they carried before dawn, their patience shaped by years of repetition beneath the same relentless sun. The temple itself feels almost suspended in the heat of midday. The open courtyards shimmer faintly beneath the bright sky. Stone columns cast short shadows close to their bases. Warm air drifts lazily through open spaces, carrying little movement with it. In shaded walkways, priests and servants move more slowly now. Some pause briefly beneath covered areas where the air remains cooler. Clay cups of water pass from hand to hand. Faces glisten faintly with sweat. Yet the calm of the temple never breaks. There is fatigue here, certainly. But it is quiet fatigue. Accepted. Expected. Part of the endless cycle of labor and ritual that shapes every day. In one shaded room near the scribes' working area, several men sit cross-legged beside low desks. Their writing continues steadily despite the heat. Reed pens scratch softly across papyrus scrolls while small bowls of ink sit nearby in the shade. One scribe wipes his hand carefully before continuing another line of symbols. Beside him, an apprentice fans the air slowly using a woven palm leaf. The movement stirs the heavy warmth just enough to bring slight relief. Outside, the Nile continues its steady flow beneath the blazing sun. The river seems almost untouched by the heat that slows life along its shores. Boats drift slowly across the bright surface. Palm trees sway faintly when occasional breezes move through the riverbanks. In the distance, green fields stretch outward from the water before giving way to dry desert beyond. Inside the temple, midday settles deeper. The hours feel longer now. Time itself seems softened by the warmth, moving slowly through the stone halls and shadowed chambers. A priest carrying a clay vessel pauses near the sanctuary entrance. He places the vessel down carefully and rests his hand against the cool stone wall beside him. His breathing is steady. His expression calm. Around him, the temple continues its quiet life unchanged. Incense burns softly. Water drips gently into a basin somewhere deeper within the halls. Sandals brush against stone. A distant bird calls from outside the walls. These small sounds become more noticeable in the stillness of midday. As the sun remains high over Egypt, the temple endures the heat with patient silence. Within its ancient walls, priests, scribes, servants, and attendants continue their routine slowly and steadily, sheltered beneath stone while the bright Egyptian afternoon stretches endlessly beyond the river. The long midday hours continue to stretch across Egypt with quiet heaviness. The sun remains high above the Nile, filling the land with bright white light that seems to settle over everything without movement. The air above the stone courtyards trembles faintly in the heat. Dusty roads beyond the temple lie nearly empty now, as most people seek whatever shade they can find during the hottest part of the day. Inside the temple, the ancient stone walls continue to offer shelter from the full force of the sun. The deeper corridors remain cooler than the outer courtyards, though even here the warmth has slowly spread into the air. Priests move carefully through dim hallways where narrow shafts of sunlight fall across the floors like pale ribbons. Their sandals make soft scraping sounds against worn stone, gentle and unhurried. Everything in the temple feels slower now. Not because the work has stopped, but because the heat asks every living thing to conserve its strength. In the inner sanctuaries, the rituals continue in quiet repetition. Fresh incense is placed onto glowing embers, releasing slow streams of fragrant smoke that drift upward toward the shadowed ceilings. The scent settles into linen garments and clings softly to the skin of those inside. Offerings are adjusted carefully. Bowls of water are replaced before they can grow warm. A priest kneels beside a low stone table. His movements are measured and calm as he arranges fruit and bread in neat rows. Nearby, another priest wipes dust gently from the carved surface of a sacred statue using a folded linen cloth dampened with cool water. No one speaks. There is only the faint crackle of incense, the soft rustle of fabric, and the distant sounds of the temple breathing quietly around them. Outside the sanctuaries, the courtyards lie bright beneath the midday sun. The stone underfoot feels hot now even through sandals. Workers crossing open areas move quickly from one patch of shade to another, their eyes lowered against the brightness. Water carriers pass silently with heavy clay jars balanced against their shoulders, leaving faint damp marks on their linen clothing where the cool vessels rest. Near one shaded wall, a servant pauses to drink. He tilts a clay cup slowly, careful not to waste even a drop. The water is cool from deep storage rooms beneath the temple. He closes his eyes briefly as he drinks, then wipes his brow with tired fingers before continuing on his path. The kitchens remain active despite the heat. Large clay ovens radiate warmth into rooms already thick with midday air. Workers shape dough slowly at low tables while others grind grain with steady circular movements. The smell of bread baking mixes with smoke, warm clay, and sweat. Even here, no one hurries. The rhythm remains calm. One older kitchen worker sits briefly near an open doorway where a faint breeze enters from the courtyard. His hands rest quietly on his knees for a moment before he rises again to tend the ovens. Around him, younger attendants continue carrying baskets and jars back and forth through the warm haze. Outside the temple walls, life along the Nile has slowed under the sun. Farmers rest beneath woven shelters near their fields, waiting for the worst of the heat to pass before returning to work. Fishermen sit quietly beside their boats along shaded banks where reeds sway gently in the river breeze. In market streets, merchants speak lazily from beneath cloth coverings stretched between mud brick buildings. Animals seek shade wherever they can find it. Donkeys stand motionless beside walls. Dogs sleep beneath carts. Birds settle silently among palm branches. The entire land seems to breathe more slowly beneath the weight of the afternoon. Inside the temple, the scribes continue their work in shaded chambers. Papyrus scrolls cover low wooden desks in careful stacks. Reed pens scratch softly across the surface of the pages, creating a quiet rhythm that blends with the distant sounds of footsteps and shifting cloth. One young apprentice carefully mixes fresh ink beside his teacher. The older scribe pauses occasionally to stretch his stiff fingers before continuing another line of symbols. Sweat gathers lightly along his brow, but his concentration never breaks. The records of the temple must continue, no matter the season or heat. In another shaded room, several priests rest briefly between duties. They sit against cool stone walls with clay cups beside them. Some close their eyes for a few moments while others simply sit in silence, listening to the faint sounds drifting through the temple corridors. There is exhaustion here. But it is quiet exhaustion. Not resisted. Not feared. Simply accepted as part of life beneath the Egyptian sun. A breeze moves through the temple at last, faint but noticeable. It slips through open courtyards and narrow hallways carrying the scent of river water and reeds. Linen garments stir gently. Oil lamp flames flicker for a moment. The coolness lasts only briefly, but everyone feels it. A priest standing near the sanctuary entrance lifts his face slightly toward the moving air. Then the breeze passes, and the warmth settles once more over stone and skin. Inside the sacred chambers, the statues remain silent in the dim light. Incense smoke curls upward in pale twisting shapes. Fresh flowers rest in shallow bowls beside bread and fruit offerings. The priests continue their movements slowly and carefully, preserving the calm order that shapes every hour within the temple walls. Time feels stretched during these afternoon hours. The sun seems unwilling to move. The bright light outside remains almost unchanged as shadows cling tightly beneath columns and walls. Yet slowly, so slowly it is difficult to notice, the angle of the sunlight begins to shift. The longest heat of the day has begun its gradual turning toward evening. Outside, the Nile glimmers endlessly beneath the bright sky. Boats drift in slow silence. Palm trees sway faintly near the riverbanks. The distant desert beyond the green fields shimmers beneath waves of rising heat. And within the ancient temple, sheltered beneath stone ceilings darkened by centuries of incense and shadow, the priests continue their endless routines with patient calm, carrying the sacred rhythm of daily life forward through another slow Egyptian afternoon. Very slowly, the afternoon begins to soften. The sun still hangs high above Egypt, but its light has changed in a way that only those who spend their lives beneath it truly notice. The harsh brightness of midday begins to lose a small part of its sharpness. Shadows, which rested tightly beneath columns and walls for many hours, begin to stretch outward once again across the stone floors of the temple courtyards. The heat remains strong. Warm air still drifts through the open spaces, and the stone walls continue to release the warmth they absorbed throughout the day. Yet there is now the faintest suggestion that evening will eventually come. The land itself seems to sense it. Inside the temple, the rhythm of life continues steadily. Priests move through corridors with the same calm pace they have carried since before dawn. Their linen garments are slightly wrinkled now from the long hours of labor and heat. Some carry fresh vessels of water. Others move quietly toward the sanctuaries with offerings prepared for the later rituals of the day. Nothing feels hurried. The temple does not rush toward evening. It simply flows into it. In the inner chambers, the air remains dim and cool compared to the bright courtyards outside. Thick stone walls protect these sacred spaces from the worst of the afternoon heat. Oil lamps flicker softly along the edges of the rooms, their small flames steady in the still air. A priest enters carrying a shallow bowl of fresh figs and dates. He places them carefully beside earlier offerings, adjusting their arrangement with slow attention before stepping back. Another priest kneels nearby, wiping a thin layer of dust from the floor stones using folded linen dampened with cool water. The scent of incense lingers gently around them. It has settled into every surface of the sanctuary over many years, blending with the smell of stone, oil, and dried flowers. Even in silence, the chamber feels alive with memory and repetition. Outside the sanctuary, the temple courtyards remain bright beneath the afternoon sun. Servants move between storage rooms carrying baskets of grain and folded cloth. A pair of younger attendants lowers heavy water jars carefully into shaded areas where the contents can remain cool longer. The sound of clay scraping softly against stone echoes briefly through the corridor before fading again into quiet. In the kitchens, the busiest hours have passed. Bread baked earlier now cools on woven trays stacked neatly along the walls. Fires burn lower beneath the ovens. Workers prepare simpler meals for the later part of the day while speaking softly among themselves in tired voices. One older woman sits briefly near the doorway grinding herbs with slow circular movements. Outside the open entrance, sunlight spills across the courtyard in warm gold. She pauses once to flex her sore fingers before continuing her work, steady and patient. Beyond the temple walls, Egypt continues beneath the afternoon heat. Farmers return gradually to their fields after resting through the harshest hours of midday. Irrigation channels sparkle beside rows of green crops near the Nile. The sound of wooden tools striking damp earth drifts faintly across the fields. Fishermen guide their boats slowly through calmer water now, their nets hanging heavily at the sides. Along dusty roads, merchants begin moving again between villages as the worst of the heat slowly eases. The Nile remains constant through all of it. Its water reflects the changing light of the afternoon sky in long shimmering patterns. Reeds bend gently along the banks whenever the breeze returns. The river seems calm and endless beneath the wide Egyptian sky. Inside the temple, scribes continue their work with steady concentration. The shaded writing chambers feel cooler now than the open courtyards outside. Papyrus scrolls lie carefully arranged beside bowls of ink and bundles of reed pens. The scratching sound of writing fills the room in soft rhythm. A young apprentice studies a completed scroll while his teacher corrects a line nearby. The older scribe's fingers are stained dark with ink from many years of work. His shoulders are slightly bent from long hours seated beside low desks. Yet his movements remain precise and careful as he continues recording the endless details of temple life. Time inside the temple moves differently from the world beyond its walls. The outside world follows the changing light and labor of the riverbanks. But within these stone corridors, time is shaped by ritual, repetition, and silence. Morning offerings become afternoon offerings. Water is replaced. Incense burns low and is lit again. Floors are swept. Lamps are checked. The cycle continues gently without interruption. In one quiet hallway near the sanctuary, a priest pauses beside an open window cut into the stone wall. Warm air drifts through the opening carrying the scent of river water and distant growing fields. He watches for a moment as sunlight moves slowly across the courtyard outside, bright against the pale stone columns. Then he lowers his gaze and continues walking. The temple itself seems quieter now than earlier in the day. Not because there is less work, but because the heat has softened every sound and movement. Footsteps feel slower. Voices remain low. Even the birds nesting among the upper temple walls call less often now. A servant carrying folded linen pauses briefly in the shade of a column. She presses her hand against the cool stone beside her and closes her eyes for a moment before continuing onward. Around her, the temple breathes slowly in the afternoon warmth. In the inner sanctuaries, preparations begin quietly for the evening rituals that will come later. Fresh oil is poured into lamps. Offerings are inspected carefully. Water basins are cleaned and refilled. The priests perform these tasks with the same calm focus they carried before sunrise, though their movements now hold the gentle weariness of a long day beneath the Egyptian sun. Outside, the light begins its gradual turning toward gold. The sky remains bright, but softer now. Long shadows slowly return to the courtyards. The stone walls glow warmly beneath the lowering sun. And within the ancient temple, among incense smoke, quiet footsteps, and cool shadowed halls, the priests continue their endless daily routines beside the Nile, carried gently forward by the calm rhythm of another Egyptian afternoon slowly moving toward evening. The afternoon slowly begins to lean toward evening. Across the land of Egypt, the light softens into deeper shades of gold. The fierce brightness of midday fades little by little, replaced by a warmer glow that settles gently over the Nile, the fields, and the ancient stone walls of the temple. Long shadows begin stretching across dusty roads and open courtyards once again, moving quietly with the lowering sun. The heat remains, but it has changed. It no longer presses heavily against the land with the same sharp weight. Instead, warmth lingers softly in the air and stone, rising from the ground in slow waves that drift through the temple halls. Inside the temple, the rhythm of work continues with calm steadiness. Priests move through the corridors carrying fresh offerings and clay vessels filled with cool water drawn earlier from shaded storage rooms. Their steps remain measured and quiet, shaped by repetition older than memory itself. Nothing in the temple feels rushed toward night. The transition happens slowly, almost invisibly. In the inner sanctuaries, preparations for the evening rituals become more careful now. Lamps are inspected one by one. Wicks are trimmed gently between practiced fingers. Fresh oil is poured slowly into shallow bowls of bronze and clay. The air inside the sacred chambers feels peaceful and dim. Sunlight enters only in narrow beams through small openings high above, falling across walls carved with figures and symbols worn smooth by centuries of touch and drifting dust. Incense curls upward in pale threads, moving lazily through the stillness. A priest adjusts a folded linen cloth draped beside an offering table. Nearby, another carefully arranges fresh bread and fruit before the sacred statues. The movements are almost silent. Even the placing of a clay bowl against stone is done gently, as though loud sounds themselves might disturb the calm balance of the room. Outside the sanctuaries, the courtyards begin to cool very slightly. The stone floors still hold the heat of the day, but the air moving through the open spaces carries a softer feeling now. A breeze from the Nile drifts through the temple, stirring loose strands of linen and carrying with it the scent of water, reeds, and damp earth from the riverbanks. Workers pause more often now in shaded areas. A servant carrying water jars rests briefly beneath a covered walkway before continuing onward. Two attendants sit quietly near a storage room wall sharing a small loaf of bread and a cup of water between them. Their voices are low and tired, blending into the soft sounds of the temple around them. The kitchens settle into a calmer rhythm. Most of the heavy work of the day is finished now. Fires burn lower beneath the ovens. Baskets of baked bread are stacked neatly along the walls. Clay bowls are washed slowly beside basins of water that reflect the golden afternoon light. One older kitchen worker sweeps scattered grain from the floor using a reed broom. The soft scraping sound echoes gently through the room. Nearby, another worker stirs herbs into a pot while steam rises slowly into the warm air. Outside the temple walls, life along the Nile shifts toward evening as well. Farmers begin gathering tools from the fields. Irrigation channels reflect the lowering sun in bright ribbons of gold. Fishermen pull their boats closer to shore, preparing for the slower hours of dusk. Children move through village streets carrying baskets and bundles beneath the fading heat. Smoke from cooking fires rises into the sky in pale twisting lines. Donkeys walk slowly along dusty roads toward home, their footsteps soft against the dry earth. The entire land seems to exhale gently after the long day. Inside the temple, scribes continue working in shaded rooms where the air remains cooler. Papyrus scrolls are rolled and tied carefully after long hours of writing. Ink bowls are covered. Reed pens are cleaned and set aside neatly. One apprentice stretches his stiff fingers while his teacher studies the final lines written across a fresh scroll. The work is never truly finished. There will always be more records tomorrow. But the day's labor begins to settle now into quiet completion. In another part of the temple, several priests gather briefly beneath a shaded colonnade. They speak softly together while drinking cool water from clay cups. Their faces carry the weariness of long hours, but also the calm familiarity of lives shaped by routine. The temple has guided their days in the same rhythm for many years. Morning rituals. Midday labor. Evening offerings. Night silence. Then morning again. The cycle continues without interruption. A breeze moves through the colonnade once more, lifting the edges of their linen garments lightly before passing onward into the courtyards. Inside the sacred chambers, the evening preparations continue. Fresh incense is placed carefully beside glowing embers. Lamps are arranged so their light will guide the sanctuaries gently into night. Water basins are cleaned until their surfaces reflect the dim light like still pools beside the Nile. A priest pauses briefly near the sanctuary entrance. Beyond the doorway, the courtyard glows beneath warm evening light. Long shadows stretch between the columns now, dark and cool against the pale stone. Birds circle high above the temple walls before settling into quieter places for the coming night. He watches the changing light for a moment. Then he turns back into the sanctuary. The rituals continue. The calm continues. Outside, the sun lowers closer to the horizon. The Nile reflects deep gold and bronze beneath the fading brightness. Palm trees cast long shadows across the riverbanks. The distant desert beyond the fertile fields begins to cool beneath the coming dusk. And within the ancient temple, surrounded by incense, warm stone, and quiet footsteps, the priests move steadily through the softening hours of another Egyptian evening, carried gently forward by routines as endless and calm as the flowing Nile itself. The sun lowers slowly toward the western horizon, and the evening light across Egypt grows softer with every passing moment. The brightness that once covered the land with sharp white heat has now become warm and golden. The Nile reflects the changing sky in long bands of bronze and amber, moving gently beneath the fading light. Palm trees along the riverbanks sway lightly whenever the evening breeze passes through their leaves. Inside the temple, the atmosphere changes with the light. The long heat of the day still lingers within the stone walls, but it no longer feels heavy. Cool air begins returning slowly to the shaded corridors and inner chambers. The temple seems to breathe more deeply now, settling into the calmer rhythm that always arrives before night. Priests continue their evening preparations with quiet focus. Oil lamps are lit one by one throughout the sanctuaries and hallways. Small flames flicker softly against carved stone walls, their warm glow replacing the sunlight slowly withdrawing from the temple spaces. Shadows gather gently in corners and beneath columns. The transition from day to night happens gradually here. Nothing changes suddenly. In the inner sanctuaries, the sacred chambers glow with soft lamplight and drifting incense smoke. The scent of burning resin fills the cool air, calm and familiar. Priests move slowly around the statues of the gods, adjusting offerings and preparing the final rituals of the day. A priest pours fresh water carefully into a polished basin. The surface ripples quietly before becoming still again, reflecting the lamp flames in small trembling shapes. Nearby, another priest folds linen cloth with patient hands while murmuring soft ritual words barely louder than breathing. The chambers feel peaceful, protected from the outside world, almost timeless. Outside the sanctuaries, the courtyards darken slowly beneath the evening sky. The stone floors still hold traces of warmth from the day, though the air above them has begun to cool. Long shadows stretch across the open spaces between columns. Birds settle among the upper walls and rooftops, their calls growing less frequent as dusk deepens. Servants move quietly through the temple carrying the final water jars and baskets needed before night fully arrives. Their footsteps echo softly in the cooling corridors. Some pause briefly to light lamps along the walls, shielding the small flames carefully with their hands from the evening breeze. The kitchens begin to quiet now. The fires burn low beneath the ovens. The smell of baked bread and herbs lingers gently in the air while workers clean clay bowls and stack baskets neatly against the walls. Voices remain soft and tired after the long day. One kitchen worker rinses his hands slowly in cool water before sitting near the doorway to rest. Outside, he watches the sunlight fading across the temple courtyard. The sky above has begun to shift into deeper shades of orange and pale purple near the horizon. Beyond the temple walls, Egypt moves slowly into evening as well. Farmers return from the fields carrying tools across their shoulders. Boats drift back toward the riverbanks where fishermen secure ropes and unload the final catches of the day. Cooking fires glow brighter beside mud brick homes as families gather for simple evening meals. Smoke rises gently into the darkening sky. Children's voices soften. Animals settle into quieter places for the night. The land itself seems calmer now after the long hours beneath the sun. Inside the temple, the scribes finish the final records of the day. Papyrus scrolls are rolled carefully and tied with linen cords. Ink bowls are sealed. Reed pens are washed and stored away in wooden containers. The scratching sounds that filled the shaded writing rooms throughout the day slowly come to an end. A young apprentice carries completed scrolls toward a storage chamber lit by a single oil lamp. The soft glow follows him along the corridor as shadows deepen around the stone walls. Elsewhere in the temple, several priests gather briefly beneath a covered walkway open to the evening air. They drink cool water and sit quietly together, watching the changing sky beyond the columns. The breeze from the Nile moves gently through the courtyard, carrying the scent of reeds, river water, and damp earth cooled by dusk. No one speaks much. The silence feels comfortable. Familiar. The temple itself grows quieter with each passing moment. In the sanctuaries, the final evening rituals begin. Incense burns more heavily now, filling the chambers with pale drifting smoke. Lamps glow steadily along the walls, casting warm light across sacred statues and offering tables covered with bread, fruit, flowers, and cool water. The priests move carefully through the ritual motions they have repeated countless times before. Their gestures are slow and precise. Their faces calm. Their voices low and steady. A priest kneels briefly before one of the sacred statues. The lamplight flickers softly across the polished stone surface while incense smoke curls upward around him. For a moment, the chamber feels completely still except for the faint sound of breathing and distant footsteps somewhere deeper within the temple. Outside, the final edge of the sun slips lower toward the horizon. The Nile darkens into deeper shades of bronze and blue. Palm shadows stretch long across the riverbanks. The desert beyond the fertile lands begins to fade into evening darkness. Inside the temple corridors, more lamps are lit as natural light disappears. Warm points of flame now guide the pathways between chambers and courtyards. Stone walls glow softly in the dimness. The air grows cooler with every passing minute. Servants finish securing storage rooms and gathering unused supplies. Doors close gently. Footsteps grow fewer. Voices fade. The temple begins turning inward toward night once more. Yet even in this quieting, life continues steadily. A priest carries fresh oil to refill a sanctuary lamp. Another folds linen cloth carefully beside a basin of water. A servant sweeps dust softly from a corridor floor before extinguishing the final daylight lamp near the courtyard entrance. These small acts continue the endless rhythm of temple life. Outside, stars begin appearing faintly above the Nile. The evening sky deepens further into blue. And within the ancient temple, beneath the soft glow of oil lamps and drifting incense smoke, the priests move gently through the final rituals of another long Egyptian day beside the calm flowing river. Night settles slowly over Egypt once again. It does not arrive all at once, but in layers, like a soft curtain drawn carefully across the sky. The last traces of orange and gold fade from the horizon, leaving behind deepening shades of blue and violet. One by one, the stars return, faint at first, then clearer as the darkness grows steadier. The Nile becomes darker now, reflecting only scattered points of light. Its movement remains unchanged, quiet, and continuous, flowing as it always has beneath the sky that never stops turning above it. Inside the temple, evening has fully given way to night. Oil lamps now provide the only light within the sacred spaces and corridors. Their flames burn with steady patience, casting warm circles of glow across stone floors and carved walls. Shadows gather again, but this time they feel softer, more settled, as if they belong to the night rather than resisting it. The temple becomes quieter with each passing hour. Not empty. Never empty. But deeply still. The priests who remain awake now move with the slow rhythm of late-night duties. Some tend to the final sacred lamps, ensuring each flame is steady and protected from drafts moving through stone hallways. Others walk gentle patrols through corridors, their steps unhurried and familiar. There is no urgency in their movements. Only continuity. In the inner sanctuaries, the evening rituals have come to their final moments. Incense still lingers in the air, though it now drifts more lightly, as if even the smoke itself has grown tired. Offerings remain carefully arranged before the statues of the gods, bread, fruit, water, and flowers resting in quiet order. The priests stand or kneel in calm silence as the last parts of the ritual conclude. A final gesture. A final spoken phrase in a soft voice. Then stillness returns. The sanctuaries remain lit, but no further movement disturbs them now. Outside these sacred chambers, the corridors stretch into deeper quiet. Lamps placed at intervals along the walls glow like small resting points of warmth in the darkness. Their light reflects faintly off polished stone and worn carvings, revealing shapes that seem older and more distant in the night. The air inside the temple has cooled completely now. The heat of the day has finally released its hold on the stone, allowing a gentle freshness to settle through the lower corridors and open courtyards. The change is subtle, but noticeable to those who remain awake. A priest walks slowly through an outer passage near the courtyard. His sandals make soft, almost invisible sounds against the stone floor. He pauses briefly at a column, listening. The temple is not silent, but its sounds are minimal now: the faint flicker of oil lamps, the distant rustle of fabric, a quiet shift of movement far down another corridor. Beyond the temple walls, the Nile flows beneath a fully dark sky. The water is almost black now, broken only by reflections of stars and the faint glow of distant villages along its banks. Small boats rest near the shore, tied securely for the night. Reeds move gently in the river breeze, producing soft, continuous sounds that blend into the night air. Egypt has entered its deepest calm again. Inside the temple, the priests who are not on duty have returned to resting chambers. Simple rooms lit by a single lamp in each space. Mats laid carefully on stone floors. Linen coverings folded neatly at the sides. Sleep comes quickly to many after the long heat of the day and the steady rhythm of work. Even in rest, the temple never feels fully asleep. Some priests remain awake through the night cycle, maintaining the gentle order of the sacred space. Their presence is quiet, almost blending into the architecture itself. One sits near a low lamp in a corridor, eyes half lowered, listening more than watching. Another moves slowly through the sanctuary entrance, checking that offerings remain undisturbed, that lamps continue to burn evenly, that nothing has shifted from its proper place. These tasks are small, but they hold the temple together through the hours of darkness. The sky above continues to deepen. More stars appear, filling the wide Egyptian night with steady light. The moon rises slowly, casting a pale silver glow across rooftops, temple walls, and the distant river surface. Inside the temple courtyards, the moonlight now joins the oil lamps. Together they create a soft layered illumination, natural and human-made light sharing the same quiet space without conflict. Stone columns stretch long shadows across the ground. Doorways open into deeper darkness. And yet everything remains calm. A priest carrying a small vessel of oil pauses beneath an archway open to the night air. He looks briefly upward at the sky beyond the temple walls. The stars are bright now, scattered across the vast darkness like ancient markers of time. He breathes in the cool air before turning back into the corridor and continuing his slow path. Inside the sanctuaries, the statues remain still in the dim glow of lamps. Incense has nearly faded now, leaving only a faint memory of scent in the air. Offerings rest quietly where they were placed earlier in the evening. Nothing moves except the soft flicker of flame. Time feels especially gentle at this hour. Not absent. Not fast. Just softened into quiet continuity. Outside, the river continues its eternal movement beneath the night sky, carrying the world forward in silence. Inside the temple, the priests continue their slow watch through darkness and light, through stillness and faint movement, through another ancient night unfolding exactly as it has for generations beside the Nile. The night settles fully over the temple, not as an ending, but as a quiet resting place. Oil lamps continue to burn in small, steady flames, though even they feel softer now, as if the temple itself is breathing more slowly. The corridors are still, the courtyards empty of movement, and the sacred chambers rest in a calm that feels complete and uninterrupted. There is nothing left to prepare. Nothing left to rush toward. Only the final presence of night, holding everything gently in place. The priests who remain awake move less and less now. Their tasks have already been done, their rounds already walked, their offerings already placed with care. What remains is only watchfulness, quiet, and patient, like the river outside that never truly sleeps. In the resting chambers, sleep deepens. Breathing slows. Bodies settle fully into the stillness of woven mats and cool stone beneath them. The temple does not feel divided between work and rest anymore. It feels whole, unified in silence. Beyond the walls, the Nile continues its endless journey under the stars. Its surface reflects faint light from the moon, then loses it again in soft darkness as it flows onward through the night. The land around it rests completely now, fields, villages, and distant roads all held in the same gentle pause. Inside the temple, the last lamps are tended with care. Not because they must burn brighter, but because they are part of the night's quiet balance. Then, slowly, even movement begins to fade. A final priest pauses in a corridor, listening to the silence around him. There is no urgency in what he hears. Only calm. Only the familiar stillness that has existed here for longer than memory can hold. He turns away, and there is no need to hurry. The temple remains as it always has been. Stone holding light. Stone holding shadow. Stone holding time itself in steady patience. Outside, the sky is wide and dark, filled with distant stars that do not change and do not leave. The moon drifts quietly above the Nile, casting a soft silver path across the water. And everything feels gently complete. Not finished. Not gone. Just resting. As if the entire world has lowered its voice at once, and chosen, for a little while, to simply be still. The temple does not close. It does not end. It only remains, breathing slowly in the quiet Egyptian night, beside the river that never stops, beneath the sky that never forgets.